Virginia Dupuy, Executive Director of the Education Alliance. Welcome again to the Education Collective. Thanks to Region 12, we have two special guests today, Dr. Donna Beagle and Mr. Patrick Briggs. First, I have on the set Dr. Donna Beagle, who has been in our community before. If you'll recall, on the November of 2009, we had Dr. Donna Beagle here before to speak to both the community and to about 5,000 teachers in the Farrell Center. That's where you've been this morning, I understand.
Yes.
But so that our audience knows more about you, I think the education community, so many of us know you, but please introduce yourself, because I think who you are and your background is such an important part of helping people understand the authenticity of your work. So, Dr. Beagle, please just tell us about yourself.
All right. Well, I bring the perspective of having been born into generational migrant labor poverty. So my mom picked cotton, my dad cut grapes. We followed the fruit season from Arizona, Oregon, Washington, and California mostly. And my mom's dad was from Texas, actually the Amarillo area. No one in my family literate. Most of my family members cannot read and write. Grew up in a world where we worked that day for food that night. Everybody worked really hard, but nobody ever made enough to pay the rent and the utilities. So we were always making those kinds of choices. Constant evictions. My only experience with police officers is they took everyone I loved away and put eviction notices on our door up until I was about 28 years old. So I didn't have a perspective of police officers other than that. I am the only family member who's not been incarcerated, and I talk a lot in my trainings about how if you go to the prison and listen to people, you'll hear poverty, poverty, poverty. And some prisons now are really looking at learning challenges, assessing learning challenges that folks have had, or undiagnosed, untreated mental health issues that folks have had. So you see a lot of that in our prison system. But this to me is more than work. I dropped out of school when I was 15 and got married. That was normal. Kids can only know what they're exposed to in a really meaningful way. So what I talk a lot about in my trainings is, you know, if you're in poverty, especially generational, you're spending time with other folks who are also from generational poverty, or who are also out of salt and butter, who have also been taught that they don't look right, they don't talk right, they don't know the words in the educational system. So all through school, I didn't know the words my teachers would use. They would talk about things. I'd be like, what does that word mean? And my teachers would say, go look it up in the dictionary, with the very best of intentions. So when I went to the dictionary, of course, I found 5 more words I didn't know. And that was often equated to my IQ. She's not very bright, she doesn't know these words. And I didn't know subject matter or examples from middle-class world, because we are so segregated in our communities, and I'm talking by class. We just look at who do middle-class people spend time with. You're not having meaningful interactions with people who use education to earn a living. You're not having meaningful connections. So when I say I never knew a soul at 15 when I quit school who benefited from education, a lot of times people will say, but wait, you knew your teachers. And I say, being in the room with somebody is not knowing them. To know someone, you have to identify with them and really see that they're not so different from you. You have to find ways to build that common ground so that you understand that you're more alike than you are different. So I did drop out of school at 15, got married and had my honeymoon in a cherry field in Wenatchee, Washington. Married a man from generational migrant labor poverty. He had dropped out of school 7th grade. And we began our lives exactly like we had grown up. We were working that day for food that night. And I had 6 pregnancies while in the deepest poverty in America. 2 babies lived. I talk a lot with health folks about how infant mortality for women in poverty is equal to Malaysia in our country, in our wealthy, wealthy country. And I know a lot of these statistics firsthand. So that's a perspective I bring to this work.
Yes. Well, I remember you're talking about your mother being, how much love she had for her children. I mean, that was, the children were her world. And yet she and her husband were working, your father were working very, very hard every day. And from what I remember you saying this morning when you were talking to, 5,000 teachers at the Farrell Center, you said that when you were growing up, your idea, the primary thing you wanted to do when you grew up was to be a mom. That was the main thing for you.
It was all I ever wanted. I literally thought I was on the planet to be a mom. It's all I ever wanted to be. I wasn't around people who talked about college, or I never even met someone who had a career. So I was going to be a mom, and I would figure out a way to get by, and that's really all I knew. In my trainings, I often get asked, why do people in poverty have babies? And so I try to answer that from both a personal and a professional perspective. From when I had my children in poverty, the meaning of having a child was I would play with them. We would sing, and we'd figure out a way to get by. In 1998, married to my second husband, who had 15 years as a senior design engineer, who also had a degree in French. I was finishing my doctorate. He was raising my kids. And I'm traveling all over the country. I'm keynoting, I'm doing workshops, I'm doing institutes. And Chuck said to me, what do you think about having a child? And I said, we can't afford it. Because by that point, I had been exposed to what middle class people get exposed to on a daily basis. That, you know, when middle class people talk about having children, they talk about, do you have college tuition? Do you have health care? Do you live in the right neighborhood so they can go to the right schools? Do you have the right car? You know, I think about that a lot. You know, you can go to almost any city in this country and call a real estate agent and say, where are the good schools?
Yes.
Which tells us that we know not every kid gets the same. And that's what we really focused on this morning, was helping educators get that foundational understanding that kids are coming in from generational poverty, like me, with parents who can't read and write. Kids are coming in from working class poverty, where their parents are working at Walmart, McDonald's. The census data show us that majority of people in poverty in America are working more than one job.
Yes.
So the isolation of poverty combined with not knowing the words, not knowing the behavior, you know, it begins to feel like school is not for you. I always tell people, my mom never went to a school conference. She would say, I ain't going in there and make a fool out of myself. Those people want to talk about school. I don't know anything about school. But if one person had asked my mom about her kids, she'd still be there talking. They were her pride and joy.
Yes. Well, I remember you used the phrase this morning, the invisible nation, talking about poverty across this country, and we certainly know it's a huge issue here in our greater Waco area. But you talked as if there is a gap, and I believe that, but tell me a little bit about how you've experienced living in both worlds, you know, one foot in middle class and then one foot, and that transition going from, getting your GED. How old were you when you started your GED?
26.
26, and you already had a number of children. And for 10 years, you devoted yourself to getting this education, went from GED to getting a doctorate.
Well, I'm very privileged. You know, first I had my mom, and she took care of my kids. A lot of people don't have that. When I speak to women in poverty, they'll often say, oh, your mom watched your kids. So when my first marriage ended when I was 26, I was privileged to get into a pilot program. And the 4 women in that program stood up and told their life stories. I had never heard a middle-class person's life story. And I had bought into the idea that we all start the same. Everyone has the same chance. I believe that. But what it meant to me in generational poverty was everyone has my life. They have parents who can't read and write. They're constantly evicted. They live in cars. They live behind truck stops. So as these women began telling their stories, I was shocked. I was like, you lived in one house your whole childhood? You went to one school? you had a doctor, you've never been hungry? And my mind was like, well, no wonder you get to be on that side of the table. And
Yes.
that learning that I wasn't the cause of poverty, that I had different experiences, that of course I would be where I am with those experiences, freed me up to write in my diary, I want to try to get that GED they've been talking about. But if you read my bio, it doesn't start with my academic credentials. It starts with self-confidence, with learning that there's nothing wrong with me. There's a lot wrong with poverty.
Well, I know that you this morning you told a story about having a mentee, somebody that you mentored, and her starting out as when you first met her, that she owned heavy makeup and all kinds of things about her hair and her clothing that was kind of startling. And I remember you're saying that this young person, what was 16, 18?
16.
16, and she kept saying about herself, I have a problem, I don't have a brain, or I don't have much brain, or something.
Right.
There's something wrong
Right.
with my
She'd
brain.
really internalized the poverty as a personal deficiency, like most people in generational working class do. So she'd come to believe that she wasn't smart enough to learn. So I actually had to say to her, I'm a doctor. I'm telling you there's nothing wrong with your brain. Because she doesn't know what kind of doctor I am. But this young woman had been on the streets since about the age of 2 with her mom after her dad died. And she had had everything happen to her. She'd been raped. She'd been beaten. And it was to her fault. It was to her, something's wrong with us. That's why we're there. Not, wow, my mom doesn't have education or skills to earn a living. Because her mom was working 2 jobs, but they couldn't afford rent like a lot of our families today. So when I talk about poverty, I talk about a community-wide approach. I developed the opportunity community model for just this purpose.
Yes.
Because teachers can't do it alone. They can't deal with the complexities of poverty.
No.
Health professionals can't do it alone. Justice professionals can't do it alone. The business community can't do it alone. The faith-based community can't do it alone. It's going to take all of us getting poverty informed, and that's first, because one of the most powerful moments of my life was learning that it wasn't that people didn't care about people in poverty, it was that they didn't know.
Yes.
And I've literally, in 24 years of speaking and training across this nation in 48 states and 6 countries, I have learned we graduate people from college without Poverty 101. We don't know our history. Most people don't know that it was illegal to be poor in the 1700s.
Well, that's right.
They forced people to wear a P on their sleeve in the Pennsylvania area. And they wrote notes like, if we can just make it hard enough on them, they'll quit acting poor.
Oh, yes.
So Herbert Gons wrote a book called War on the Poor, and he talks about we keep asking people in crisis to act middle class. Like, what do we do to somebody who shows up at the welfare office late? You have to take your 3 buses back home, or a kid who shows up to school late. We punish them, and we give them detention and suspension. If you look at the history of poverty, which I've studied thoroughly, you'll see that the metaphor of war is the most common used metaphor. Because that
Like
is
the
what
war on poverty?
well, war is the most common metaphor used in the literature on the history of poverty, because that's what it feels like. So the parallels between what people are experiencing in survival mode, when you don't have your basic human needs met of food and shelter, it's really hard to think about getting a GED when you don't have a place to lay your head.
Yes. Yes.
Those are important pieces. So the opportunity community model, we bring the entire community together and open up, get the community poverty informed. We do a big prosperity summit, invite United Way, Community Action, the business community, the elected officials, and get everybody with some shared language around different life experiences of poverty, like working class, generational, immigrant poverty. In immigrant poverty, of course, you have both the language barriers, the cultural barriers, and you have the hunger and the evictions. So getting people a grounded understanding of poverty, and then really opening up the doors so that they can engage. People want to help. We're in 12 states with this model, and we have judges who are saying, I'll give my number to a neighbor in poverty. I'll call them up and say, how are they doing?
Yes.
They want to know what a word means, I'll help. We have lawyers who are saying, I'll be a navigator, I'll help. And we train our navigators so that they are poverty informed and they understand where people are coming from.
Well, Donna, I think we're going to have to bring you back to Waco again. I'm so grateful that Region 12
honor.
brought you this time, and I'm so appreciative of your work. But for our audience, could you tell us how to learn about your work? I know you have some books and you have some workshops that you do. If we go online to Donna Beagle, I think that TV is going to be, I think that Larry Hosey will put your information up.
Sure.
But,
if you go to the website, there's curriculum kits with in-service trainings. There's my book, See Poverty, which has, people love this. Community members are doing book reads with it. We have intensive poverty institutes we do, and we also certify people to serve as coaches in health organizations, justice organizations, education systems, to really, again, continually educate about what does this look like from the perspective of the people who are living in it, and then how do we help them to move out and stay out.
Yes. Thank you so much
My
for
honor.
coming. Dr. Beagle, Donna, you're a wonderful person doing
you.
very, very important work across this community. And I look forward to the next time we get to see you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Welcome back to the Education Collective, and I'm about to introduce our second guest, who was also a speaker this morning at the Region 12 convocation that WISD and Region 12 put on this morning at the Farrell Center. And my second guest is Philip Briggs, who is the Texas State Director of AVID. And I think many people in Waco are very familiar with the AVID program because it's a very, very fine program. But let me instead, you introduce yourself, if you will, please.
Sure.
First, I always like to put a human face on this. Tell us about yourself, your background, and then how you got into AVID and what you feel like is really important about AVID.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first, thank you for having me. My name is Patrick Briggs, and I'm the AVID Texas State Director, which means basically I get to have the privilege and honor of supporting all of the schools in the state of Texas that have the AVID College Readiness System. And I got started with AVID, it was about 1999. My school in Houston received a comprehensive school reform grant, and we were looking for something that would help us change the culture of our school from just one where students came to one where we were serious about college and career readiness. We wanted every student in our school to have the opportunity to be ready for college so that when they got to a Baylor or a Prairie View A&M University, they were ready for the rigors. They had experienced that when they were with us, and so when a college professor expected them to write a certain paper or to do a certain math calculation, they could say, I was ready for that because in my middle school and my high school, my teachers incorporated rigor, they incorporated high standards. My teachers gave me the opportunity to do that type of work in high school and middle school, and my teachers also expected me to do that. And that's what happens when students get to universities. A lot of them tend not to make it, not because they're not smart, simply because they're not college ready.
Yes. Well, and college ready means having the right kind of study skills, well, let me let you tell us. What does
Sure.
college ready really mean?
Well, when we look at the definition, and my go-to guru is David Connolly, and his definition is very simple. It's, can a student go to a credit-bearing institution without the need for remediation? In the state of Texas, we send about half of our students, and those are the students who go to college, needing a remedial course or a developmental class. They have to pay for developmental reading or developmental math because when they get to the university, something about their test score says, hey, you're not quite ready for the rigors of college. So we want you to pay for a year of school that will never count, but it's designed to make sure you're ready. And so my definition of college readiness is David Connolly's. Can a student go to college, start paying for courses that will count towards degree completion?
I think that's so important. I know that's been something that's been grieving me for some time, to realize students were going, and many times they don't go past the remedial or the developmental courses
Correct.
because they begin to give up.
That's correct.
It's too hard to realize you've spent that much money already and couldn't go forward.
Correct.
Or if you did, you were facing the possibility of being maybe a mediocre student at best.
Right.
And so to take care of that in high school is very, very important. But now, how do they do that? I mean, what are the rigors that you're talking about?
Great question. Well, through the AVID College Readiness System, one of the things that we do is we make sure students know how to do school. We found that students who do really well in school, they're not typically the smartest kids. They're the kids who understand those hidden rules, how a school works. A school is a middle-class institution, so how does that function? What are some of the hidden rules? How do I study? How do I write? How do I take notes? One of the things I talked about this morning is, as a first-year teacher, I trained students how to copy. They were really good copiers. And I thought I was giving them lots of information on science so that they could do well on a science assessment. And as a first-year teacher, now that I look back, I realized I spent a lot of time teaching children how to be really good copiers.
Copying off the blackboard.
Copying off the blackboard, the overhead projector, whatever it is. And then I would be upset with students when they couldn't perform on my science assessment. Now I look back and shame on me. I was teaching students how do you copy and then expecting them to do well on a science assessment. So one of the things that AVID does is we teach students how to do school. We also provide the tutorial support, because a student who is going to take, say, a college readiness course such as AP or advanced placement or pre-AP or dual credit or inter-baccalaureate, those courses that are designed to make sure you're ready for college, a student who has never taken those courses may need a support system. So part of what we do is we help with Socratic tutorials, where it's not where, oh, you don't know how to do x plus y equals 3x plus z. It's more, tell me what you know about that question and how do you think we should start. And as a tutor who's trained through AVID, I teach you how to question students so that they become their own problem solvers, with myself as a tutor as the guide on the side. And then for about 20% of the course of AVID, it's about the motivational pieces. It's about making sure you understand we expect you to do this, you can do it, and here are all the resources we're going to make sure you have so that you are not only ready, but you're motivated to continue towards degree completion.
That's wonderful. Well, I know Tom Stanton has been very interested in the AVID program. He visited an AVID class at La Vega
Right.
High School, I believe it was, and was so impressed with what he saw and the way the students were performing.
Correct.
And this is, a school system that's like 92% free and reduced lunch, and so there are many financial problems that are challenges that the families have, but they're performing at an extraordinary level.
Right. And that's what we say in AVID, all kids. Our mission at the AVID Center is to prepare all students for college readiness and success in a global society. I don't believe that a label such as I'm from poverty or I'm this race, because like I said this morning, I'm the poster child for the achievement gap.
Yes.
And what I truly believe is it's not about my income or it's not about my race or my background or my experiences. It's about how well am I prepared to go into society and be a contributing member. And we can do that for all kids in elementary, through middle school, through high school, by giving them the tools so that they have the opportunity. As I talked this morning, I said, I don't believe there's an achievement gap. I believe we have opportunity gaps. I have the opportunity. I'm sitting here with you as a degreed professional, not because I'm the smartest kid, but because I had great teachers who gave me opportunities to experience the rigor of what Prairie View A&M University was going to be like, so that when I got there, I knew exactly what the professor meant when she said, write this paper and turn it in. And there were kids that were at Prairie View with me who didn't make it. Now, they're smarter than I will ever be, I believe. I was given the opportunity to be made college ready. And then also I believe there's an expectation gap in this country. Who do we expect to go to college? When I go into schools, I see students who maybe we don't expect to go to college. So,
and that can happen at a very early age if we're not careful.
You're correct.
That students are somehow just brushed aside or put in special education, or, you know, and I'm not an educator, so
I
I'm
understand.
already saying more than I know directly and for certain, but that's just what I hear and what I heard you say essentially this morning, that it's, for one thing, you mentioned that relationships are so important
Yes,
too.
ma'am. Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a relationship and a kind of a level of trust with a
Right.
student, they're not going to try.
Well, I feel like relationships, that's that barrier that, think about it. I mean, there are certain things that you will do to, with, and for your family members
Yes.
that if a regular stranger on the street asks you to do it, you might, you know, be taken aback. You might say, "Are you talking to me? You don't even know me like that." And the only difference between that stranger and your family member is what I call, or what we call, the relational capacity. There are certain things you will do to, with, and for your family solely based on the fact that you have a strong relationship with them. Where some stranger on the street could ask you for the same thing. They could say, "Would you do this for me?" And you'd look at them and say, No, I won't do this for you. I don't know you." What you're really saying is, "I don't have a relationship with you." And I was telling the teachers, because as a educator, we all know we have students that will do anything in the world for us. They will perform for us. They will do all of their work for us. But that same child will go to another teacher and act like he or she has no sense. And what happens is the child doesn't change in the time between your class and mine. What changes is the relationship with that significant adult in the other room. And that's something I had to learn the hard way as a first-year teacher, was that I was trying to teach science, and I had to back up and say, for my second year, I'm going to teach children.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to use science to do it, but I'm going to start building relationships with children so that all of them are career and college ready by the time they leave me. And they were willing to work for me because they believed I cared about them. And I said this morning, no kid cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And once
Yes.
they know how much you care, just like your family member, that you have a relationship, you'd do anything in the world for them.
That's right. Well, and you delivered a wonderful message this morning to about 5,000 teachers
It was a
at the
privilege.
Farrell Center. I'm so appreciative of your coming to Waco and doing that.
Well,
and
thank you.
also appreciative of Region 12 for bringing you here.
Thank you.
And I hope you'll come back again.
I will, anytime.
I hope you've enjoyed today's program, and look forward to seeing you next month.